Hello and welcome to Punk Rock Academic, the podcast where the rebellious spirit of punk rock meets the halls of higher education. We dive into the stories of those who break the mold, challenge the status quo, and bring the DIY ethos to academia. I'm Alex Yore, and with me as always is Dallas McCullough, your guide through the intersection of anarchy and academics. Get ready to meet the professors, scholars, and students who are as hardcore about their studies as they are about their music. Let's turn up the volume and tear down the walls of convention. This is Punk Rock Academic. Hello everyone, and welcome to Punk Rock Academic, episode 11. For this episode, we were fortunate enough to get to sit down with the incomparable Kate Reddy, M.A. Kate is currently a PhD student in the Anthropology department at U Albany. Prior to that, she received her M.A. degree from U Albany and a bachelor's in writing and literature from the New School in New York City. Kate is a mainstay in the punk and hardcore scene. She's played with the legendary Krishna Conscious hardcore band 108 on and off since the early 90s. Kate 08 is also co-owner of the celebrated independent label Equal Vision Records. Equal Vision has an admirable roster of bands, including the likes of Bane, Hot Water Music, Saves the Day, Yellowcard, and so many others. It was a treat to get to chat with this pillar of the punk rock community. Let's get into it.
Welcome. Another episode number 10. We made double digits. Awesome. Alex currently has palm trees in his background in beautiful Honolulu, Hawaii. I am freezing my ass off in Detroit, Michigan, watching the snow come down. We're here with Kate 108, the legend, who is freezing your ass off in Albany. Cool. And now, this is going to be so Midwestern. I've been called out. I used to call it Albany, I remember. And then Catch 22 were like the only person I've ever heard to call Albany is Dave from Mustard Plug. I'm like, we're from the same place, dude. That's that upper Midwestern vowel race sort of thing. So I will make my best effort to call it Albany, since that's where you're currently doing your PhD, Kate.
Yeah. So we don't call it Albany. We have kind of a worse New York accent. Sometimes people point it out to me because I don't think I have it as bad as some people, but we say Albany. And we say,
okay.
I don't
that
say.
Works.
Yeah, it's not as bad. Yeah, Albany.
So you're currently rocking out the PhD in anthropology there, but the way that I'm familiar with you is from the band 108. So I lived in Connecticut for a couple of years, went to shows out there. One of my show buddies was like, dude, you should hit up the chick from 108. I'm like, holy shit. I had absolutely no idea that you're doing a PhD, but then also from chatting with you, I guess I kind of knew, but I didn't put the connection together of Equal Vision Records as well, which I'm like, I knew that was from Albany. I mean, I live in Detroit, so Bear vs. Shark is from here. The Chiodos brothers are from near here. So there's a lot of tie-in for sure. So just pretty stoked to see how all the shit ties together, especially since you're an active PhD student like Alex and I are. And I don't know, I feel kind of old doing it because I'm 38, but you mentioned you started after you dropped your kid off at college. So it's kind of next level. I'm saying a lot of the time doing a PhD, like Alex and I, it's like, all right, I'm 38. I feel ancient sometimes, but I think it's really cool that you said that you dropped your kid off at college and that was you're like, fuck, I'm going to start my PhD tomorrow. Like it's coordinated that way.
I started when I was 49. Yeah, 49. So that's pretty old to start, but at the same time, sometimes, and this might be more of a consideration for moms than other people. And I don't know, because people do it all different ways. But once I had 3 little kids, I didn't have we're Equal Vision was young and I had 3 small kids and it just seemed completely overwhelming to try to go to graduate school with all of that happening, because Equal Vision is a pretty overwhelmingly giant project. And at this point, I don't do that much with it, but it's been kind of like our whole, the way we support ourselves and what we've been doing since 1994 or something like that. So it's a big deal. So I didn't really think I could also squeeze in doing academics, especially when the kids were little. It was just it's just too busy. But I kind of held on to the idea that was something that I wanted to do. And I just bided my time until my older kids were already at college, and I sort of bided my time till an opening came, and then I just took it. So that was, it's kind of a lot. And I was a little afraid of, PowerPoint presentation didn't even exist. I had to get my transcripts on a piece of paper. They're actually on a piece of paper. They weren't even computerized. So because I graduated from the new school in 1994. I think they didn't like put them on a database until 1996 or something like that. So when I went to get my transcripts, it took like 6 weeks because I had to like dig them through. They had to like go to the papyrus section of the dig them, and then they mailed them to me, and then I had to walk them over. And when I went to the registrar's office, they were like, "What is this?" And I'm like, "It's my grades." So they hadn't even ever seen. Now you just kind of click on the program and you see what your grades are. And like, but in those days they used to mail them home, and then you would get them, and like, it was very different. And it was pretty terrifying and pretty humbling to start doing something, after not having been in school for 30 years, literally 30 years, something like that, close to, or 27 years or something. It was a long gap year.
Right. Well, let's get the chronology going. So you're from Albany originally?
So I actually grew up south of Albany. My dad lived in Albany, but the hardcore scene that I got interested in was in Albany.
Right.
And that was just because Albany is like 2.5 hours north of New York City. I lived a little bit closer to New York City near Hudson, a town called Hudson. And when I was growing up, there were a lot of people, and there still are a lot of people that make that area their country home from New York City. So it's really funny. Actually, I have a picture of, it's right up. It happens to be on my shelf. I have this picture of myself as a kid and my friend, and her name is Mara. I'm still friends with her. And she and her and another girl, Michelle, were like legit New York City punk rockers. And they would come to upstate in the summers, and they introduced me to all the different kind of music. And then on my own, I realized that in Albany, there were shows happening. There was a guy named Dave Stein. I don't know if you've ever heard of Dave Stein. In New York, he's kind of a legend. He passed away last fall, but he was a student at SUNY Albany, which is where I am, like in the 1980s. And he was a punk, and he put on all of these hardcore shows. So every band, and my husband then eventually helped him, every band would come from New York City to play in Albany. And it was a really developed scene. I mean, we had everybody come through here, even bands from California, like 7 Seconds and The Descent played, and Dag Nasty, like big, bands that legendary, like all played when I was like in 9th grade and 8th, 9th and 10th grade. So
this was like late 80s you're talking?
It was the mid 80s. And like I saw Black Flag. Dave Stein had he figured out that the school, the university had a budget. So he brought Black Flag, came and played. And that was really my first show that I remember. So I went to see Black Flag, and I was in 8th grade.
So right at the tail end of I think 80, sometime 80s, that was right around when they ended.
Where it was like the Dead Kennedys and Circle Jerks and stuff. We were like, those bands are sellouts. And even Black Flag, I think they played that. And then it was kind of like, I didn't see them again. But I mean, I'm glad I did. I'm glad I saw that. But then it was the wave of like early Dag Nasty with Dave Smalley. The bands like, I'm trying to think of who JFA played, and like, wait, hold on a second. DRI played, bands like that time. And we would just go to whatever shows there were. I mean, we weren't like super, if there was a show, you went, like every single one.
So your kind of introduction to going to shows in general happens to be seeing like the most legendary, like punk and crossover, thrash and hardcore bands in exist. Like, did you know at the time, like, was it, because like when I think of like, I'm talking, DR, like I saw DRI play in Hawaii, and it was like a really small club, and that seemed very strange. But usually with any of these sort of bands from that era, if I see them now, it's, there's 2,000 people in a warehouse for some sort of hardcore reunion thing, and the shirts are going for stupid amounts.
15 kids with like flannel shirts tied around your waist, and like combat boots that you got at the Army Navy store. You know what I mean? And you were like, yeah, it was. Right. It wasn't. And then there was like a little club in Albany, which was called 288, which is just the number of the Lark Street, which is just a few blocks from here. And at 288 Lark, there was like Gorilla Biscuits played, like early, right when they started the band. They took us Albany because I couldn't get a ride, and they were too young. They were like, we were kids. Like I was maybe so they were maybe 18 or 19 years old or something. And then, Yeah, I mean, it's cool, but like at the time you weren't like, oh, these are legendary. You were like, this is the show.
Right.
Go. I'm just trying to think of other bands that played at that time in Albany, but there was a really good selection. I'll just put it that way. Like really, because Dave Stein was really connected. Agnostic Front played a lot. Warzone. And
Now, so at that time when you started going to shows and stuff, because that's kind of an interesting scene, because it's kind of split in half between your like fuck the world, destroy everything punks, but you've also got kind of that early stages of the kind of posy hardcore scene. Cro-Mags kind of both sides of that, really. They were shitheads, but they were also
time though. We didn't differentiate. Like we just, if there was a show, we went to it. It wasn't. We weren't like these are the straight edge bands. These are the whoever bands. It was like this is the hardcore scene, and there's 25 or 30 of us. If there was a show with 100 kids, it was just like huge. So, we didn't, we were there for whoever was playing, and we just showed up. And there were even like smaller bands that were local. There was like a band of high school kids called Glee Club that happened like at the end, close to when I was going to college, and everybody would show up. It was just like that. It was just more family oriented. And it was, we would go down from Albany, we would go to New York City and go to the Rock Hotel and see Bad Brains or see bigger bands, and we did, but they, and there were, the Rock Hotel was like a pretty big club, sick of it all. But, they would come up here and play. By the time I was like, it's so funny because 4 years now is like nothing, but 4 years then is like your entire high school career. By the time I was like in 11th grade, Fugazi would play a lot, and like Bad Religion played in this, like the VFW hall over the Elks. It was actually at the Elks Lodge in a neighboring town, Schenectady. And I was like, God, these guys are age. They were like 26.
Yeah, well, because Greg's got a PhD. What a loser. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, why are they still doing this? Yeah.
Right.
I mean, and then the Albany scene after Dave Stein and Steve, it kind of veered into this like imitation of like East Bay, like everybody's reading Maximum Rock and Roll, and it was a little bit different flavor. And that was never totally my flavor. Like I really liked the Youth Crew flavor. I was never like hugely into Youth of Today, but it's definitely those are more my people than like, although I did have some fun. I spent like a little while in the East Bay, just like a month or something like that, and we saw the band Spitboy, and they played their first show, and like I think the other band playing was Neurosis, and I'm like, how is it just like not appreciating? Like I can't believe I didn't really like appreciate what that was,
Yeah.
At the time there's bands, you're like, it was like Steel Pole Bathtub and Libido Boys and different like, and then it was early, it was like Green Day before they became like a super famous, like they had just become like, and everybody's like, what's happening? Like they're a punk band. Like, how is this happening? And I was there right when they were getting banned from playing at Gilman Street because they were like on a major label or something. Everyone's really
posers. Yeah. So when you started going to all these shows and stuff, how were you as a student? Like, were you still doing all right? Or like, I mean,
I was a great student the whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
I was a great student in high school, and I was a great student in college. I mean, I think I kind of maybe I didn't really have like the support from my parents or like really know how to do graduate school like when I was 18, but also I was just kind of like wanted to do more music stuff. And then I like moved into the Temple and so, then I was in 108, and that big tour actually happened between my junior and senior year of college. So I had to leave the tour and go back for one day and register for classes because you used to do that on a piece of paper.
Well, let's break that down. So you went out of high school, you went to New School, which is down in New York City. Then you were while you were taking, what was your bachelor's in from down there?
My bachelor's degree is in writing and literature.
Right. So you're doing writing and literature at the New School in New York, and you're still going to shows all the time. And that was when you had joined 108 while you were still in college?
Yeah. We were all in college. Like everybody from the New York hardcore scene was college age, and we were like in college. Like it was, what you did. Some people were at Hunter College. There were like Sam McFeeters, who was like a punk kid that was in Born Against. He was at my college. He went to my college. That's actually kind of how I found out about the new school. Although now I'm like, oh my God, every famous anthropologist was a professor there. And when I was there, people used to come as guest lecturers, like Bell Hooks taught there, and Cornell West used to come all the time, and Skippy Gates, as we call it. All these people would come to the new school, and we would, hear them lecture. I didn't think it was a big deal to hear Bell Hooks lecture. I did many times. Didn't seem like a big deal. Now you're like, oh my God, I don't think, it's always looking back where you think, wow, those were the best times, it was amazing. So yeah, I wasn't super focused on what I wanted to do, but I was like, oh, I can get a degree and just read a lot of books. I'll do that.
Right. And new school is kind of notoriously for being kind of like the kind of lefty, hip, progressive kind of, like there's a lot of punks and hippies and weirdos and shit there, right?
It was more like Marxist, leftist, radicals. It wasn't really hippies. It was like, people, if you had a writing class, that teacher probably wrote for the Village Voice. If you had a literature class, it was with, or poetry class, it was like Sekou Sundiata, or like one of these people that became, famous people or whatever, it was because it's a school right in New York City and they have a lot of guest teachers. But it was definitely like as punk rock as a college can be, I would say. Yeah. So like, I think at the time in New York City, like many of the people from the hardcore scene were all like the Hare Krishnas, and like the Krishnas and the hardcore scene were so intertwined, like everybody loved Cro-Mags. We knew they were Krishnas. It seemed like being punk rock plus, because it was like double counterculture. Like first you were a punk and then you could like double drop out and be like, like first you could drop out of society by being a punk, and then you could extra double drop out by getting into this. We're all vegetarians. We're all straight edge, like almost all of us, or like a large majority of us. So it wasn't like we had to give up too much to do that. And I honestly became attracted to the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita, but also a lot of the people that I really thought were amazing people had moved into the temple. So we were like, and there was another thing, which is they gave you free food. So you're like, oh, wait a minute, I can get free food. And then since I was a child, I was attracted to Indian philosophy in India. So that was something I knew about from my mom. So I kind of like went to the temple and I just fell in love with the whole atmosphere and the sound and the smells and the philosophy of the Krishna consciousness, which is really something, we like in hardcore, we call people the Krishnas and then we call people the Hare Krishnas, but it is a legitimate Indian religion that's very ancient that just came to the West. But it's not that it's like a cult, actually. I mean, even though we have there's a lot of cult like stuff that happened once it came to the West, I went very early on to India and I was like, oh wait, this is like being like a Christian, and India, like everyone's doing this is the normal way people celebrate or do the things. So, and I kind of knew that because my mom had taken me to the Vivekananda Center. I took music lessons there when I was a little kid. So it wasn't like a totally brand new thing to me. So I kind of found it in bits and pieces. Also, when I was in college, I wanted to study, comparative religion, and went to a lot of different, I went to the Zen temple, and sat Zazen with, I was like, that's not for me. I have to be too still. So it was like, I went to the meditation of light and sound, which was Takar Singh, who was like a Sikh teacher. And I just was interested, but the singer from Underdog, Richie Birkenhead, he was he would talk to me about oh yeah, you should check this out. Or he would just point out all the fallacies of normal, what do you think your fashion is going to make you happy? You think you have cool Doc Martens, now you're going to be happy? And I'd be like, no, I don't think so. But I knew Steve. I knew my husband. He was part of the Albany scene. So I knew him since 8th grade, really. and he joined. So that made me realize like, oh, maybe that's something people do for real. So it wasn't that much of a stretch for me. It was a pretty easy, like I didn't question it too much, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Well, now sort of getting back into the academic side of things, I'm curious about your master's work and what did you do for your master's degree? Like what ultimately led you back to school, and how did you sort of navigate that coming back, having gone in the 90s in your undergrad, kind of right out of high school?
So my particular master's degree, so like I said, if the world was my oyster and I had no responsibilities, I probably would have just gone to SOAS University in London and studied some obscure yoga text and talked about goddess worship or something. But I couldn't really do that. So I decided that one of the ways that I could study what I wanted to study was really what I wanted to understand was how is it that people from the West, like Americans and Europeans and people from Australia and New Zealand, how is it that they have this calling to try religion that's absolutely not from their culture and adopt it and become practitioners of one of the many forms of Hinduism? It's fascinating to me. So I realized that one of the ways I looked on the U Albany website and I was like, what do they have that I could, what degrees do they offer that I could explore this question through? And I realized I had a degree in anthropology, and I thought, well, maybe for a couple of years, I'll just do this master's in anthropology and I'll study religious traditions and, or like, why are people religious at all? Why is that like pretty cross-cultural phenomenon? So some of it was just a very practical thing. But then once I started doing that, I was always doing a lot of work with feminist theory. And I realized that for myself, I really wanted to critique the ashram system that I had lived in. And so my master's paper is a feminist analysis of hegemonic practices within the ashram system. So it's very specific to that. And then after I did that and I banged my head against the wall for 3 years, and after, 30 other years of banging my head against the wall in pursuit of some kind of feminist solution to the patriarchal nightmare that we're in, I decided that I might just take a little break, and just study. That was my master's. I completed that work and I felt like that was done. And even though some people encouraged me to continue and talk about women in religion, and I did a pretty deep study of women writers from different religious traditions and thought a lot about it, I just decided that what I'm doing for my PhD project is talking about Western pilgrimage to India. So that's thinking about what are embodied practices, why do people become interested in something that is, they're not really from within the tradition, although people do convert just like they convert to other religions. And what does it mean for the normal yoga practitioner to go on a pilgrimage to India? What does that mean? Especially because it's a very specific cultural sacred practice of Hinduism. And what does it mean? I'm studying authenticity also. Like, what makes something authentic? So that's what I'm doing now for my project. Although I'm at the very beginning stages of that, so it may shift. Although my fieldwork will be being in these spaces in India that are used by Western teachers to teach yoga and yoga adjacent practices like chant and what's called puja. Do you guys know what that is? Do you guys know about anything about it? It's ritual. It's like a ritual of worship that's practiced in Hinduism, and pujas and meditation and different things like that. Like, why don't people in the West, why do so many people want to practice Buddhism? Why do they have Buddhist teachers come into corporations and teach mindfulness? Mm-hmm. Like, why not just be a Catholic?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's something about, for many people in the West, Catholicism and Judaism and religions, the Abrahamic religions that we're familiar with, aren't doing whatever people are looking for anymore. And that could be because of the power of the Catholic Church, destroyed that for people that felt too tainted. But I mean, if you delve into any religious tradition, you'll find power issues, I can assure you.
Yeah. It seems, I guess kind of from an outsider standpoint, so I got sober almost 12 years ago now, and I spent a lot of time reading Bhagavad Gita. I spent a lot of time in a yoga studio sort of thing. And just because I think reading a lot of the Buddhist literature or kind of, I guess the Bhagavad Gita, it's so much of that is on the idea of Arjuna, especially. It's he seemed punk as fuck. That was a DIY dude. He had to go and get shit done on his own sort of thing. And there's something kind of empowering on it, I think, ties into punk rock, as opposed to the Abrahamic religion seem much more of you are fucking worthless without accepting this person as your master sort of thing. And you need to have to tithe 10% and hate, I don't know, women or something.
That was the unfortunate part of being in the ashram for me, was that, you have this idea of this idealized society, and it was going to be idyllic. But when it came down to it, and one of the reasons I wanted to critique it was that I found that it had a lot of the same pitfalls. And, in its purest form, Bhakti Yoga should be this loving relationship between the living entity and divinity. But as soon as you have assets, then it turns into power and politics, which I don't know if you're familiar with Foucault. You are an academic, so I think you probably are. But basically, he's one of the anthropologists that said it. It's everything boils down to power and politics. And I was unfortunately, it does seem to be that way. And so in a sense, I realized through doing my master's degree project that I wanted to separate myself out from institutionalized Bhakti Yoga. And in India, mostly, there's no central figure. There's no pope in Hinduism. And Hinduism is many, many different things. It's just the word Hindu, if you don't know this, comes from, it's kind of like the word Hispanic. It's not people that are Hispanic come from places all over the world, and they were colonized at one time by Spain, maybe. That's a way you could think about it. But they're not really from, people from Ecuador might be completely unlike people from a different place in Mexico, but they're both lumped into this. So essentially what happened was when there were people coming from Persia into India, they called everybody that lived on the other side of the Sindhu River Hindus. And then all of these divergent practices and belief systems, some of them which were theological, some of them which were more like Buddhism, that's more like almost like a psychoanalytical system of controlling the mind, or those all got lumped into one thing called Hindus, when it really wasn't a term that people used to name themselves until the 19th century, when there were just so many people calling. So it's one of those kind of not very, I wish we could get rid of, almost get rid of it type of a name, except that people now are really claiming Hindu. There's a Hindu nationalist movement happening in India. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but
BNP or BNJ, I forget what it is.
Yeah, it's actually horrific. It's actually a crazy classist. It's basically a version of white power, but for India, where the Brahmins are at the top of the social hierarchy and everybody is beneath them. And it's it's a really problematic thing. So I think my realization from studying anthropology is that those kind of issues of human society will just bleed into everything, including idyllic, try starting a commune, and I've lived on. Within half an hour, some people are really good at some stuff and they take over everything, and some people don't do much at all and just break things, and some people are cooking all the meals and some people are just eating them. And that's just, it's very difficult to create this, idyllic, utopia. I'm not sure it can exist because it's just doesn't seem to be how people function.
That makes sense.
Does it? That's true. I mean, the closest, I honestly have to say that I feel like the hardcore scene did a better job. Honestly.
They do a better job at a lot of things. I think of my master's program was through Yale School of Public Health, right? And the Surgeon General went there and shit. And it's and I would see, we'd have a lecture on One Health talking about the animal industry fucking up the world, and then heart disease and cancer, non-communicable diseases linked to diet and exercise. And then there'd be a Pepsi machine 10 feet outside the door next to Doritos, and then they'd give out factory farmed meat and heavily processed absolutely everything and alcohol to everybody. I'm this is fucking stupid. because I go on tour, and if we're at some anarcho squat and fucking God knows where, like some crusty with face tattoos made a pot of vegan curry for $2 a head and fed everybody, and it was awesome, and it's a shame that, punks, but especially from, kind of that positive hardcore scene, are so much better at public health compliance than the School of Public Health from one of the most pretentious universities in the fucking world.
It's interesting, and I kind of gained an even better appreciation for the whole punk world by being involved with not the Hare Krishnas, yes, and then there's other like ashram societies, and I was like, within that world, within the punk world, like if you're friends with people, they're hooking you up. You can stay with them. They're gonna feed. They're gonna put you on the guest list. There's no way they would take your money for anything. Like there's just like, no, that's not. It goes into this like open flow, like non-capitalist situation, and where it's like, no, here you take my band shirt, like like we're breaking even is fine. Like it's just gets in this crazy thing, and I didn't find that to be true. I was like, I was actually like kind of like shocked and surprised, like the first time when it was like, oh wait, but we're like friends, and you want me to pay for your thing? Like I just thought like once you entered like friendship, then like you were on the list like forever, like just a part of punk culture where, and I mean, obviously that's not really totally anti-capitalism, but there was some sense of like community where like that just wasn't done. And I was surprised out that that's not how all societies function. The hardcore world really functions like in this way of a family that I think is pretty rare. And I was also, for a while I ran a record label, which is called Anthropology. I still technically do, but we were going to put out all this yoga music. And we did. And we put out some really successful albums. But it was shocking to me that all these people that were like spiritualists were like money grubbing. I just couldn't believe it. I was like, wait a minute. Like the other people that we work with are these like you're saying, like face tattoo. I'm like, they're like members of the underworld. Like half of them are on HBO Gangland. And I feel like they shouldn't be more involved in these like,
yeah.
And yet they are, so I was kind of like, I first of all, I feel like, should I know half the people on HBO Gangland? And I'm like, it's just funny how the hardcore scene is divided into, you have like, people that are college professors and academics. And I have people that are like, I won't name them by name, but they're not academics. And my friends and they're really smart and they're really interesting people. They're just definitely, they're less law abiding than, or they have a different set of values. And yet we're all able to kind of all be together in a lot of ways. And even during the pandemic when people were like, I was like, oh my God, no, I can't believe some of the stuff people thought. And I still love the people. I still am able to feel sort of like affection and love for them because I'm like, well, they haven't read so many books or, they have like some crazy theories and this and that. But in the end, somehow I'm able to set things down and just remain sort of, it's just kind of like, I might not disagree. I wholeheartedly disagree with a lot of their belief systems. And I truly, now I'm teaching human biology. So it's like extra funny and crazy when I hear things that people think and I'm like, hey, that's not it. But like, it's not even close to it.
Right.
But sometimes it's just like, okay, here we go. Like, are we going to, like, life is pretty short, so are we going to just show up for each other if we can? I mean, there's certain things that, cross the limit. But.
Yeah. I guess it's just kind of funny thinking that, these are experiences of touring with a bunch of, really just fucking like the scum of the earth are generally more functional than a lot of the people that are supposed to be the ritzy motherfuckers that have it all figured out.
Yeah. I mean, New York, and I don't know if this was particular to the whole New York world, but I don't think so, because I think New York was like big enough that we had like a lot of input, and like you kind of have like the New Jersey kids and you have like Pennsylvania kids, and Philly's not that far. Now I think, I only had my little small stint in in Oakland, California, like in 1990 or something like that. But I feel like the scene of, I don't know, somehow we've all managed to really stay friends. Like I'm still really close friends with all of the people or a lot of the people from high school through the scene, even though we also had these like long stretches of time where we didn't talk. And I don't know if that's just the magic of hardcore in general or, specific to New York, but I think in general, there's really just a lot of commonality. And I have met now a lot of the punk rock academics. There's a guy named Mike Dines he's in England at a school that I'm having a senior moment remembering the name. And he'll come to me, and he's done a lot of work writing about veganism and hardcore and like the Krishnas and hardcore. And there's actually a lot of us. There's actually a lot of punks that are like doing academic work, because I think part of the prerequisite, you can get into hardcore because you just want to like hear loud music or you're angry. But a lot of the people that get into hardcore and punk music are really deep thinkers. So I think that's what the commonality is. And even if they're not deep thinkers on an academic level, they're definitely questioning. They're definitely moving through what the normal expectations of American society are and European society. And I have we have good friends. I have really good friends in Berlin. And, it's one of those amazing things if you try to describe to people like, I know people in South America because we know or I know people like all these different places all over the world where people really well, all different countries in Europe and stuff from touring and from them just kind of finding out about you and then being brave. People write to me and things like that. And I always respond. I mean, I'm not like a super famous person or something like by any stretch of the imagination, but I'd like to think that 108 helps some people in some places. And I like the feedback I get is it did.
Yeah. And then I guess on top of that, so we haven't really talked about Equal Vision much, but so it's you and your husband have been doing, it was Ray Raghunath had started originally from Youth of Today, then you folks took it over from him sometime in the early 90s. But some of the bands that you put out, I mean, just like Bane, like Aaron is a fucking intelligent dude. He knows how to write. Like he is I don't know if he's formally educated, but there's intelligent stuff. Jacob Bannon from Converge, same sort of thing. Seems like a very intelligent, very well, if you can decipher what the lyrics are, there's some really intelligent shit in there. But, putting out, I mean, Bear vs. Shark, dude, like Mark is just absolutely ridiculous as a lyricist. So there's so many, Save Today, massive band. But it seems like you put out a lot of these albums by some bands where like, it's not just like shitheads drinking 40s and fucking stuff up. Like these are, even if they are not formally educated, there are some really smart dudes playing some pretty intelligent stuff.
Yeah. I mean, the way Equal Vision went was Ray Kappa owned it. He put out a 7-inch and one other thing, and he just was like not a business person at all. So my husband took it over then. It was like Equal Vision had been around for like a matter of months when Steve took it over. And he and Ray Raghunath are like besties. So he had the inspiration. Then my husband was like, okay, this is do it. And so we did that in the Philly Temple. That was a long time ago. But after a little while, we were like, well, we can't just put out Krishna bands. There's 3. Like we can't. So one of the first bands we signed was Shift. We signed Saves the Day really early on. And Chris was actually he was like 18 or 19. He was at NYU. Smart, very well read. We did the first 2 Saves the Day records. And then and then they left for a while. And then we did another stuff. The one where they're like sitting on the couch, that's
which one? Cool. The second one.
Oh, yeah. So we did both of them. So that one, actually, that picture is my sister's apartment in Queens. We still had that yellow futon until just a few years ago. Like we literally had that futon. We had that futon and we were like, well, it's still good. We'll just like move it from place to place. And then eventually like we threw it away and someone's like, how could you throw that away? I'm like, it was,
you could have optioned that at like, this is hardcore for a lot of money.
I know, but it was time. It was time. It was very much time, but it was really funny. Yeah. So those bands, I mean, I think we were always like Saves the Day is actually one of my favorite Equal Vision bands. Like I just love the band. And I mean, we also did other kind of amazing bands like Coheed and Cambria, and the record label then expanded and grew and became so much more. And we did some bands were just like popular at the time and, fun or something. But some of them are, really, I feel so sort of proud of who the bands were and what they were doing, the type of music they were playing. I mean, I feel like some of it I'm a little disconnected from because it happened when the kids were tiny or something like that. So I wasn't super involved. But Saves the Day, it was like, Steve played it for me. He's like, "What do you think?" I'm like, "This band is awesome. We have to sign them." Like,
they were literally children at that point, right?
They were like kids. They were little kids, So I think Chris's mom came when we like signed the contract and like made sure we weren't like.
Yeah.
Recently, I was at a Saves the Day show and someone thought I was Chris's mom, and I was like, "Okay, that's really pushing it. He's only like 4 years younger than me." But and then
he looks very young, though. He is.
He doesn't, It's like his mom was actually at the show too. That was what was funny. So I'm hoping that's why they thought that, but they probably couldn't figure out why this like middle-aged mom-looking person was like with the band. So he's like, "Are you Chris?" Yeah. And I was like, "No." That's just...
You could have pulled so much tread. You said, "Listen, you little shit. I signed Give Up the Ghost or American Nightmare or whatever."
Right at the face. No,
that's right. I got Earth Crisis on speed dial, bud.
Yeah, exactly.
So with 108, you'd mentioned this earlier. So you'd played in the 90s and you'd done some touring with them as well. I know you're on a couple of albums or 2 or 3 albums.
With 108?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just was on Songs of Separation. Holy Name was recorded in the Temple, and mostly a lot of Holy Name was recorded in the Temple right before I was on 108. And then I was with them for that tour and a European tour, and we recorded Songs of Separation. And then I had a baby, and then I didn't play with them for a long time, and they would always ask me like, "Oh, come back and play." And I was like, I can't. It was hard. I had like little kids, and I was like an involved mom and doing things. I would be like, "No, my kid has a school play," or something like that. So
right.
I didn't do it. And then in like 2016, they asked me again, and I was like, all right, I'll do it. And then it was like so fun. And I played a bunch of shows since then, and we're just always trying to get Vic to leave Japan, and he has to be there or we can't play. So we kind of, we get a lot of offers, but we have to wait till we have just the right offer to like we have to like pull him and get him. He lives in Japan now, so it's tricky. Like he has to come a really long distance to make it. So yeah, I didn't play on Threefold Misery. I didn't play on that, although I love that record and I love playing songs from that record. And so for me, the heart of my like 108 was definitely Songs of Separation.
So you guys have just done like a handful of shows, but usually like This Is Hardcore, or you're doing, see, like when you're doing a show, it's not like a basement. It's like you're playing something where you are much bigger than you were in the 90s.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I think it's just like a lot of bands now have kind of like everything kind of percolated. And then, I mean, every band, that's true for every band. I mean, Gorilla Biscuits now plays these huge shows, and I don't think they were always bigger than 108, but now they're like huge. And like Saves the Day is playing to like thousands of people. I mean, that wasn't happening in the 90s. And, any of these bands, Judge, and they still play some small shows. I mean, some of the shows are pretty small, but when 108 headlined, we did really well. We do really well, actually, because there are people that are like dedicated to 108. Like, it's like, I don't want to say a cult following. But it is a bit of a cult following. So people, when we played a show in London, and people came from all over Europe because they were like, this is the chance. And we kind of never know when we're just going to be just not play anymore. I don't think we'll have a big dramatic breakup, but so when we play, people come. So, we got offered a couple of festival things in Europe, but we didn't wind up going. So I think there's just bigger opportunities for all hardcore bands. I mean, we slugged through those shows where there were, a few hundred people. But sometimes I miss that. I mean, when I came back to play with 108, the first show I played was at this place, which was called Flemington DIY, which was just like a show, no stage. We're on the ground, the crowd's just packing in. And it was actually one of the most fun shows ever because it was just exactly what you would expect, like old school punk rock show where there's just everyone's packed in. 108 doesn't get the horseshoe, where people don't come. Everyone's packed up to the stage. I don't really ever want to play a show that's got the horseshoe if I can avoid it. That seems like horrible to me. You know, I like when everyone's like, when we played, everyone's packed into the stage. People know the lyrics, everyone's singing along. And I think it's meaningful to people. I hope it is. I'd like it to be, you know, I'd like to have it be meaningful if it's good. For me, that's why I would want to do it.
Well, you guys are overdue for playing Tied Down. You said the sort of band that would be on that. That's been kind of killing it here in Detroit.
Yeah. Well, I know that, and I think like Judge is playing out in Detroit, like in the fall with or something like that. Yeah. So that will be cool.
That checks out.
Like for you, beyond just the intellectual drive to get this PhD, what's sort of the end goal for you with this? What do you hope to get out of it by the end and beyond?
I just hope to be smarter. So a lot of people ask me that, like, what's your end goal? My end goal is to have gone through the process. And so for me, I'm in a really good position because I already did the things and made the money and raised the kids and all of that. So really for me, it's just about the process of learning. And I don't have a particular, like, I don't need to teach. I'd love to teach if it works, but I don't have anything that I absolutely have to do because, you know, by the time I finish, I'll be like practically retired age. So it's really for the joy of doing an academic exploration, which I get is a luxury, but it's a luxury that we set up. It wasn't like this was handed to me. Like we killed ourselves making Equal Vision happen. Like there were some lean years in there. So for me, the process of just learning and the process of learning humility in the academic environment, especially after 30 years, is really the goal. I mean, I don't have a plan. I mean, if people want me to teach or if there's, you know, desire to have me speak or do those things, I would love to do them. But none of it is strictly required because Equal Vision's been successful. So I don't really have to have a goal, which is actually like such an incredible luxury as a person doing academics. Like I think to myself, oh, maybe I will go to SOAS and do like postdoctoral work or something. I'd like to write some books. That's something I'd love to do and use my writing and literature, you know, my know-how from that. And plus all of my anthropology things. I have an idea of doing something, which is a project of studying Indian weaving. So the weaving of saris on women's art and things like that, which sounds like really obscure and delicious to me. I'm like, woo! There's a whole sort of looking at the way women express themselves through how they adorn themselves, which is something that's like pretty much the antithesis. I mean, in hardcore, I would wager that was also true. Like how we dressed and how we looked and everything was so much a part of our identifiers of like what we wore. When we were younger, we had a look which was like kilts and like nice sweaters and bombers. It's kind of like Oi style. But then as soon as you put on Doc Martens, we called it English gentry gone awry. So funny. I just found this old picture and we're wearing like turtleneck sweaters, but they're like, you know, have like, you know, hardcore pins on them and then woolen skirts with boots. And we were like, this was the English gentry gone awry look. So I do think that social identity is something that will interest me. And I think social identity in the hardcore scene. One of the other girls in my cohort was doing a totally different project. She took time off. She worked at Equal Vision. Actually, I'm going to try that again. They use they, them pronouns. So they just came back and said, you know, I actually think I want to study hardcore music. That's what I want to do. I want to study this. And two of my professors, including my actual academic advisor, is like a true Chicago punk rocker from the late 1970s. Like he knows everything. He's like one of those like punk rock cataloger type of person. He can name everything. When I went to his class, he has like a syllabus and he's like, my favorite band is Iggy Pop and the Stooges. And I was like, okay, I'm staying in this class. You know, like, and then one other guy is like an old Texas punk. He's closer to my age, he's a little younger and was in all these bands and toured and, you know, did like experimental noise music and stuff. So this person in my cohort, they're going to actually study hardcore. And I was like, oh yeah, I want to be an advisor on that project. I want to take them around. So yeah, I don't know. I think my goal is to just continue to really, to not lose the sort of the heart fire for gathering knowledge and to just continue with that. Cause you can give up at a certain age and just feel like you're done. So I'm hoping that I don't ever do that.
That was such a Hare Krishna answer. Those who are selfishly attached to the results of their actions are bound in everything they do. Abandon attachment and attain supreme peace. Damn.
Yeah.
Be Arjuna about it. That's cool.
And that supreme peace is pretty far away. I mean, the material world
That's a goal.
beats you down, but I'm going to give it a whirl anyway. So,
yeah, fucking right. That's sick.
Yeah, if there's nothing else, we'll get into our final 3 questions, the ones we ask everybody. So the first of which is, what are your desert island album or albums? You know, you got a handful of albums you take. It's all you get to listen to. You're on the desert island. What do you bring?
okay, desert island albums. Dag nasty, can I say? 100%. Don't make fun of me, but probably anything from the Descendants.
Why would I make fun of you?
I want to be a metalhead, but it didn't. It's true that when I hear that, I'm like, man, I love this. Third,
Like Milo Goes to College, probably. Like if you had to pick one, what would be your go-to Descendants album?
one. I only get one. I thought I got a couple.
Are you gonna waste them all on the Descendants? Just their discography?
Dag Nasty, then. I'll go for Dag Nasty. Dag Nasty is my top pick. Can I say by Dag Nasty? I thought I got to pick 3. I didn't even get to my third.
No, you can get a few. You can give us a couple more. Sure.
Does it have to be hardcore, or can it be something else?
Whatever you want.
Whatever you want.
Okay, Born to Expire. Born to Expire. Leeway. Born to Expire. Incredible. Beautiful. Incredible album. Changed my life. Although those will be my 3. They're divergent. And, okay. 2 more. Madball Set It Off.
I feel like 5.
And the last one is, I absolutely love Saves the Day. I can name any of their records. I would say Saves the Day through being cool.
Sure, they'll be stoked to hear
That
that.
has
Shows like a very 2 different sides.
one of the greatest lines ever, I think. The most punk rock line ever is from that album of the, sorry, I didn't mean to yell. I'm having a bad week. I miss my mom. Because I think anybody who's been on tour, doesn't matter how fucking punk rock you are, you're like, I kind of miss my mom.
Yeah.
So the second question is, what is a band that you think is highly underrated, or a band that not as many people know about and they really should?
Oh, that's a good question. A band that's underrated but is actually amazing. The Snake, the Cross, the Crown. They were an Equal Vision band. I loved that band. I felt like people just didn't pay them enough attention. And they're not really a band now, but I feel like that was one of those bands where I was like, oh, this band should be huge. Why isn't this band huge? But yeah, I'll stick with that. I'll stick with that answer. The Snake, the Cross, the Crown.
Check that out.
That's what you guys for your curveball. You're speechless.
All right, so third and final question, and this is an easy one. What's the last thing you listened to?
You said it didn't have to be hardcore.
It doesn't.
Okay, Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan is like a very famous classical Indian singer. So that's what I was listening to like just 2 days ago. So it's really punk rock. Like if you ever see like that kind of music, which is called Qawwali music, like the singer sings and then everybody else sings. And then there's like guys that are just like professional clappers. And it's like the most like people just like lose their minds. And I think one of the reasons I like that kind of, it's sort of like kirtan music. It's called Qawwali. Why I like it is because it's like really punk rock, but it's like really beautiful too. So look it up. Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan.
That rules. Cool. Well, I think that's all we got.
That wraps it up.
All right. Well,
Thank you
thanks
for being here,
having
John.
me.
Appreciate it.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Punk Rock Academic. We hope you're as inspired as we are by the incredible stories from the punk rockers revolutionizing higher education. If you enjoyed today's show, please be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your fellow rebels. Stay tuned for more tales of academic anarchy and keep the DIY spirit alive. Until next time, keep rocking and never stop learning.